Okay, hi everybody. My name is Hannah Gosnell, and I'm a professor of geography at Oregon State University in the US in the Pacific Northwest. And I'm just so pleased to be part of this project and to be able to collaborate with all the wonderful people in CoFSA. I've had a really long-standing interest in the inner dimensions of transformative change from an academic perspective, and also the inner dimensions of regenerative agriculture. I've spent a lot of time trying to understand how farmers and ranchers think about things, how they make decisions. And as you all know, and as Rockefeller Foundation pointed out, there's a lot of focus on the outer aspects of regenerative agriculture. What are the practices and principles that need to be put in place for food and fiber production? But there's a growing number of scholars and practitioners recognizing that in that. So go to the next slide. There's a growing number of people recognizing that inadequate attention to the inner dimensions of sustainability can really lead to constrained and ineffective actions across all levels. And it's important to consider what's happening in the interior at the individual level, the collective level, and the systems level. So next slide. So that's the report. I'm just going to do a brief summary of the report and hope you all will take a look at it. Would very much welcome feedback on it. It's just a first attempt at a literature review on this very interesting topic. But so what is regeneration? Many of us are familiar, like I say, with the concept of regenerative agriculture, an approach to food and fiber production that focuses on soil health and leveraging natural processes and reducing or foregoing chemicals. But what about this broader concept of regeneration? Just some of my favorite quotes from the literature I reviewed would be that, you can think of regeneration as a process of rebuilding or renewal of the common good, taking an asset, resource, ecosystem, individual, family, organization, community, or place from crisis and collapse to recovery and renewal. And then according to Paul Hawken, in his book on regeneration, regeneration creates, builds, and heals, and it puts life at the center of every action and decision. It weaves justice, climate, biodiversity, and human dignity into a seamless tapestry of action, policy, and transformation. And then Charlie Massey, the Australian farmer, who's written some wonderful articles and books. Regeneration is about enabling the expression of nature's capacity for self-organization. And so outer manifestations of regeneration include how humans interact with nature. So for example, in regenerative agriculture, but also how they interact with their community and with each other. So one can be regenerative in relation to others. So next slide. So the inner dimensions of regeneration include the ways that individuals think about nature and their relationships to nature and each other, how they make decisions, as well as their shared beliefs, values, norms, customs, and practices. And these inner dimensions of regeneration in the literature are often characterized as really deep leverage points for transformation because they underlie all of our decisions and behaviors, and they often go quite unexamined. We don't really think about these, like, why did I make that decision? So for this report, I reviewed literature on mental models, mindsets, and culture associated with regeneration, regenerative agriculture, and regenerative design. So I'll start with mental models, before we go to the next slide, let me just say how I would define these things. So mental models, you could think of as representations in people's minds of how parts of the world work. So mental models are used for understanding and decision-making in a given domain or situation. So for example, on a farm, they reflect the cognitive process by which farmers' views about sustainable agriculture are translated into decision-making, including which management practices are adopted. Whereas mindsets are broader than mental models. They're the underlying assumptions, beliefs, values, and associated inner capacities that inform one's overall perspective and behavior. So a mindset is a predisposition to see the world in a particular way, like a filter. You could think of mindsets as like habits of mind formed by previous experience. And in general, mental models refer to thinking, where the mindsets are more related to feeling and being. And then the culture can be defined as the values, beliefs, language, rituals, traditions, and other behaviors that are passed from one generation to another within any social group. And I think it's interesting to think about how culture is a reflection of individual mindsets and mental models, but it also influences those mindsets and mental models. So it's like a reciprocal, iterative kind of relationship. I'll move now to the summary of the findings. What did I find? So the next slide, regenerative mental models. So what are regenerative mental models? In general, I think what I found is that two big concepts are emphasized when we think about mental models, how people think regeneratively. And one has to do with living systems theory, that many proponents of regenerative agriculture, for example, refer to the importance of living systems theory to their thinking about and understanding the world. And living systems thinking looks to nature for design principles for regeneration. There's a focus on processes that enable the expression of nature's capacity for self-organization. So for example, living systems, some of the key dimensions of living systems, they create conditions conducive to life. They're interconnected and nested in interdependent systems. They depend on collaborative partnerships and mutual resilience. They're constantly adapting, changing, and evolving. And they put a high value on diversity of all kinds. And then also in terms of these mental models, what informs decision-making when you're thinking regeneratively is this holistic approach. So holistic decision-making where the root causes of problems are identified and addressed. There's attention to the triple bottom line, the social, economic, and ecological dimensions. There's attention to interconnectedness and interdependence. Decisions are aligned also with one's most deeply held values. And those most deeply held values are intentionally articulated so that every decision can be aligned with those values. And there's also, of course, a long-term view, honoring the past and planning for the future. So moving on to mindsets, regenerative mindsets, some of the key concepts there in the literature. You can go to the next slide. Oh, okay. No, that's good. Stay there. Sorry. No, go back to that one's good. Yeah. So regenerative mindsets is about being regenerative. So it's associated with viewing the world relationally, with care, and with a kin-centric worldview, which can be thought of as more horizontal versus hierarchical. And so one study highlighted the critical role that relationships play in a regenerative mindset, and they identify 4 major features of such relationships. There's attentiveness, an understanding of the power dynamics of interrelation, conceding control to regain balance, and a shift in valuing of non-human species. Regenerative mindsets tend towards cooperation rather than competition, and they're also associated with a growth mindset. So there's openness to learning and experimentation, and also a strong sense of agency and self-efficacy. So next slide, and then regenerative cultures. Regenerative cultures reflect, the sum of a community of people who have regenerative mindsets and mental models, but in general, they're characterized by a culture of care, personal and planetary well-being, reciprocity, relationships. And so one study suggested that, like living systems, regenerative cultures exhibit a web of reciprocal relationships. They're constantly reaching towards being more whole, more alive, and this is the fuel that keeps regeneration alive. So there's a lot of community engagement in the co-creation of regenerative futures. So as Daniel Christian Wall puts it, a regenerative culture consciously builds the capacity of everybody in a particular place to respond and change, and accepts transformation as something that life just does. Is there something going on with the slide there? Okay, yeah, okay. And so in a regenerative culture, there's a commitment to participatory democracy and social and environmental justice and community engagement. And there's been some scholarship on the notion of regenerative democracies. And then also critical to regenerative cultures is a bioregional place-based identity. And this relates to eco-literacy, sense of place, understanding and honoring of a landscape's past. One line from the report is that the shared sense of connection to a particular bioregion that regenerative cultures support manifests in rituals and traditions that promote nature connectedness, human nature interdependence, and spirituality, and in stories and narratives that portray cooperation, diversity, equity, inclusion, and right relations. So next slide. So we took these findings from the lit review and we translated them into 12 principles that could be used in community assessments. And that's where Luis took over, and he's created this incredible framework that is going to be piloted, and he's going to tell you more about that. So I hope you guys all read the report, and I'd love to hear feedback. I'm going to try to turn it into a published peer-reviewed journal article. So any feedback or things that I've missed or key citations that aren't in there, please do send those along. I would appreciate it. So thank you.